Get my 6. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid. Time for another tale. Got my water. This tale is terrifying, mostly because it's true. And it's not so much going to be a tale about anything that's ever happened to me or anything that's happened to anybody that I knew personally. It's a tale about something that's happened recently that has been highlighted in mainstream media around the world. So most of you will have heard of this, and it's creepy. So when I was a kid growing up in Appalachia, and I've said this in a video here recently, I spent the majority of my life in the woods, hunting, hiking, training for cross country, fishing, did a lot of fishing. I had an uncle who was an avid outdoorsman, an avid hunter. And I remember one time when I was about 14 or 15 years old, talking to him about hunting, talking about the different places we went, types of animals we were after. And he said something to me. He goes, you know, Kevin, there's something that you need to always keep in mind when you're out there in the woods, hunting, hiking, running, fishing. And I said, what's that? And he said, you're never alone when you're in the woods. And you just need to be careful. He says, when you're hunting and you have a firearm with you, rifle or a shotgun, you're probably safer than when you don't. And I said, what are you talking about? And I know at this point you're thinking Bigfoot, Sasquatch, ghosts, ghouls, creepy crawlies. Nope. He was talking about man, our fellow mankind. He said there's always somebody else out there, and you never know what their intentions might be. He said the overwhelming majority of the time, they're just another hunter. They might be in their deer stand. You might walk right underneath them and never know they're up there. You know, if they're up in it. If they're up in a tree, like this tree back here where something obviously was in that tree. I'm going to move over a little bit, give you a better view. He says they might not even be in a tree stand or in any sort of ground blind. They might just be well camouflaged. Telling you, my gut's telling me we're not alone in the woods here today. Now, I don't feel as if there's another person here. I believe this is something not of human nature back here. And I hope I'm right after this tale I'm going to tell you here today. But, you know, for those of you who hunt or have hunted, you know, especially the fall of the year, the leaves are crunchy. Whatever's running around back there, it could be a squirrel. It'll sound a lot louder than it is. So what you do is you move the leaves away from the base of that big tree that you're going to lean up against, so that if you do shift your position, move your feet around a little bit, you don't make any noise. Well, if you're out there leaned up against a tree, you got your rifle with you, you're hunting deer, and I've had this happen to me. I've been that guy leaning up against a tree, and another hunter has walked by within 20 yards of me and never knew I was there. And I just sit there still, and I'm like, well, if this guy looks over here, of course I'm going to say, hey, how are you? Don't shoot. You know, I'm a person, not an animal or whatever. They never see me, just walk right by me. I never really thought about that until that uncle of mine pointed that out. And about a year after that, it was fall of the year, I was out squirrel hunting. It's back in Appalachia, and I made my way up like a dip in a valley going up towards the ridge, a lot like this terrain behind me here, all the way up to the top of the hill, cleared out my leaves, set up against a tree, and sat there waiting for squirrels to come by. And then I start hearing crunch, crunch, crunch in the leaves from behind me up on top of the hill. And I look and I watch, and here comes this guy walking right over to me. He was turkey hunting. He had on the camouflage veil and all that. He lifted it up. It was my uncle. My uncle who had told me these things just a year before. And he said, you remember that time I told you you're never alone out here? And I said, yeah. And he said, I watched you walk all the way up the hill. I've had my eyes on you for, 10 or 15 minutes before he sat down, because I was creeping slowly through the woods, trying to make the least amount of noise as possible. So that was his proof in point. So how is this a creepy story? What's this have to do with the creepy story? You guys are coming around here, especially on these beautiful October nights, to get a scary tale. Well, here over the last couple of days, we've had a couple of people who are close to us. I'll call them friends, because that's not a stretch. Came and spent a couple nights with us. They've left now. They're gone. And we had a wonderful time, and we had wonderful conversation. And last night, during our conversation, one of these two people said, "Isn't that terrifying how many bodies they found while they were searching for Brian Laundrie?" And I didn't know about this, because we don't have TV, we don't have cable. Of course we have the internet, but I go out of my way not to watch news, not to watch mainstream media of any kind, because it's depressing and it makes me angry. And so for self-preservation, I'm happily uninformed. And I view that as being better than being misinformed. So I don't watch. And I said, "I don't know anything about that. What are you talking about?" So this person told me about how they would get a tip about how maybe this guy's remains are here because they were in this area, or they were spotted here. So the authorities would go, they would look, they dig around, and they didn't find the guy or his remains, which they eventually did somewhere in Florida, but they found other people's remains. They found other bodies. And I Googled it just before coming up into my woods here today to make this video. I believe as of last count, they've discovered 7 previously undiscovered bodies due to searching for the Petito or girl. I'm sorry if I mispronounced names. I don't follow the media sagas. I don't follow it. And then the laundry guy. So they weren't finding them, but they were finding other bodies. And so this person who brought this up to me and told this to me, she says, "Isn't that just disgusting how you've got all these missing people who were obviously easily found this time because the media heat was on, the spotlight was on this one particular case, but it's like, the investigators just didn't do their job well enough. They just didn't look hard enough to find these other people." And she was kind of taking a knock at law enforcement. And I said, "That's not my take on this. You know how I take this story you've just told me about them finding all these bodies everywhere?" And she says, "Well, how is that?" And I said, "I take it as it's absolutely terrifying that we don't know just how many random killers, murderers, or potentially serial killers are out there completely flying under the radar. If they look in 7 or 8 places for these 2 people and they're finding bodies everywhere, what would happen if you just went out and randomly searched? How many bodies are just out there that we're unaware of?" So this, of course, took the conversation in a different direction. And she was like, "I never really thought about that." Years ago, 2008, I wrote a novel called Serial Street. I believe it was published in 2009, and it's out there on Amazon, print, Kindle, whatever. But the whole general theme, or the story of the story, is that, there's 2 teenage kids. They live in this neighborhood where everybody else that lives in their neighborhood is a copycat serial killer of one of the most infamous serial killers in our nation's history. Ed Gein, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy. So I had to research, heavily research these serial killers, so that when I was creating the fictional characters who were copycat killers on them, it would sound believable. They had to have the same MOs. And when I was doing that research, I came to understand more about the concept of serial killers than I ever had. I'm into horror genre, supernatural, cryptozoology, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, all these things. But the most terrifying monster out there are these cold-blooded killers. And I thought, well, there's only a few of them. I mean, you hear about a Ted Bundy like once a decade or whatever, so it's not much to worry about. Well, I found in my research that at any given time, like right now, today, as you're watching this video, even though it was recorded previously, earlier today, before it was uploaded and published, there are approximately 100 serial killers on the loose in the United States. And not only will the overwhelming majority of them never be caught, the majority of them will never have their actions known. There are serial killers out there right now who are killing people, multiple people, and it'll never be known. These guys will go to their graves never having been found out. Just last year, and I should have Googled this so I could get the name right. I can't even remember the name, but you can Google it to find out. I'm not making this stuff up. I don't know if you knew it or not, but just in the last year or two, they discovered, by way of arresting a man, the most prolific serial killer in American history. Killed more people than Bundy and Ed Gein and all these others combined. If my memory serves correctly, this man is responsible for at least 77 murders, going back to the early 1970s up until the 2010s when he got caught. How'd he get caught? Well, he kind of turned himself in because he needed health care. I think he was diabetic or whatever. He was in his late 70s by this time, and he needed some health care that he couldn't afford, so he kind of fessed up to some stuff. He was a street person. He was a homeless man. He was a black man, which, the average MO, like stereotypical serial killer is like a white male of conservative tendencies between the ages of like 25 and 40. This guy was a 77-year-old black man who, I don't know what his political views were, but he was a homeless person who was, throughout the years, would move around. He might be in Florida one year. He might be in Texas the next year. He might be up in Milwaukee for a summer, head back south in the winter because it's a lot warmer in the south, And over that 40-year period or so, he had spent quite a few years in prison for like aggravated assault, attempted murder, where one of the reasons he went without being detected and without being caught is because he would kill his fellow homeless people. And it was mostly women, and he strangled most of them. That's how he killed most of his victims. So he was killing people who kind of no longer existed in the eyes of society. People, the forgotten people. And that's how the Green River Killer, by the way, out in Washington State got away with it for so long. He was killing prostitutes, girls he was picking up on the streets. And it wasn't until he killed a girl who worked in such a position, but who had been a runaway from a very well-to-do, upper-middle-class family, people finally started. All of a sudden, it mattered, and they wanted to go after him, and that's how they found him. I go into the woods all the time, and I don't go armed anymore. And I said in a video the other day about how just after serving in combat over in Iraq, it's just not the same coming home and trying to take out something that in no way, shape, or form can defend itself against me. Me with a firearm who could, knock an eye out of a squirrel at 100 yards with open sights, and you tell me which eye, left or right. There's just no game or sport in it for me anymore, so I just don't do it. And I'm not going to stop going into the woods because I'm not scared. And I am observant and I am hyper vigilant as a result of my PTSD. I'm always on guard. A lot of people complain about me looking back in my video. Let me tell you, when I'm looking back, it's because I sense something. And just because you don't and just because you can't doesn't mean I'm crazy. Okay? I've never denied my insanity on any of these videos. Let me tell you, if you think there's not always someone or someone else out there with you, perhaps you're the one who's crazy. And this isn't meant to judge, and I'm not insulting you. So when I was Googling this, I wanted to have some names, give some examples, because my friend read that thing last night. She read an article blew my mind. But I didn't find that article because I found something else, and I can't help but think that this might be related. And so I'm going to share this with you. So I don't know the names, but I do know a couple of the situations on the, I think it was the Blue Ridge Parkway or the Skyline Drive or something, where I know they found at least 8 bodies this year, and this includes Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina. But there was I believe it was a 22-year-old black male hiking alone on the Appalachian Trail, I believe. They found his remains while they were searching for, the one that the spotlight was on around the world. And he had died by multiple stab wounds. This is a young man who simply decided to go on a multiple-day hike by himself. No motive, no nothing, just someone stabbed him multiple times, killing him out there alone on the trail. And, I mentioned the book I did and the research, or the book I wrote, Serial Street, and the research I did. And the question I kept asking myself, and this was even then, and it would be more so now, how could anybody do this and not get caught? What was I saying about I'm not the one that's crazy when I look back, because there's probably something there that you can't see? If you didn't see that, you're blind. So anyway, I asked myself, how can somebody do this on our modern times and get away with it? There's cameras everywhere. I have cameras all over my property. A lot of folks have been coming to our channel recently due to the annoying neighbor with the crayon video, and they're like, oh, now he knows you don't have cameras. That video is 3 years old, and there are cameras up everywhere now, okay? Since that time. But the answer that came to me when I was doing the research for the book, and the answer that still comes to me today, is I really believe the only way somebody could do that and get away with it is if they were to go to some of these remote locations where they're finding these bodies, where they're finding these remains that they're not even looking for because they're looking for someone else, and do it then. For example, the 22-year-old young man that was hiking alone, he might not even been awake when it happened. He might have been asleep in his sleeping bag and never knew what happened. I don't know. I don't know the details of that, and I don't want to. I'm not putting this information out there. I don't know the situation. I don't want to spread misinformation on social media. Enough of my peers do that very happily and willingly. I refuse to do that because these are people's sons, daughters, wives, mothers, fathers. These are real people, and so I'm not going to come on here and say some boogeyman or some Bigfoot Sasquatch that's an interdimensional being did it and did, because these are real people. I don't know, okay? But while I was looking for this information today to share it with you, I found yet another example, and I don't know the situation here either, but I guess here within the last day or so, there was a 55-year-old man in western Tennessee, Camden, Tennessee. As of just a few minutes ago, before I came up to make this video, they still don't have any answers as far as who his killer was. Hopefully, somebody watching this video might know something, and hopefully you'll contact the authorities. But this is one more example. 55-year-old man who, according to the article, even the law enforcement officials said everybody in the county liked. Everybody that knew him liked him. Timothy Ring, 55-year-old engineer and Air Force veteran from Camden, Tennessee. Camden. Went out yesterday, day before, something like that, told his family he was going to go work on his deer stand, hang out in his deer stand. He's obviously a hunter. He's excited because hunting season's coming up. And so he didn't come home, and they found his truck in a field, and his deer stand was in the back of the truck, the article said. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume it's one of these portable deer stands that you kind of shimmy up a tree yourself. His body was found 25 yards away in the tree line. And he had been shot multiple times. And the term used by law enforcement overseeing this case was cold-blooded. They have no idea who did it. They have no idea why. They have no motive. 55-year-old Air Force veteran, engineer, who supposedly everybody liked, who knew him. This is more terrifying to me than any story about any ghosts and ghouls and goblins and creepy crawlies. Running into Bigfoot Sasquatch out here in the forest would not frighten me nearly as much as running into one of these two-legged bipedal human being creatures who were doing these things. And based upon not just the story told to me last night by our guest, but based upon, I'm not going to say facts, I'm going to say information that was presented in the media, because we know even the facts within that information is sometimes far and few between. They're out there. They're out there. And I know a lot of you are like me. You enjoy the outdoors. You enjoy the wilderness. You enjoy the woods. Just when you go out, when you go into those woods, like my uncle told me years ago, please understand you're never alone. Hope you enjoyed this very true story. And I'll see you for more next time.